Ever since the original Final Fantasy, the job system has seen a huge amount of expansion. Some of this has come through the evolution of persistent jobs, such as the White Mage, Warrior and Thief. But expansion has also come through the inclusion of rare and unusual jobs, with some good examples being the Mime, which was introduced as a secret job in Final Fantasy V, the Juggler, which was exclusive to Moogles in the Evilise subseries, and the Mascot, which represented probably the least glamorous set of costumes available in Final Fantasy X-2. Each of these jobs had some kind of quirk which allowed them to stand out amongst the many others available, but perhaps one of the most unique is the Pictomancer. Whereas most jobs are able to deal damage via some kind of physical or ranged melee or magic attack, the Pictomancer differed by weaponizing the artistic talents of the individual who adopted the job. Perhaps because of this alternative stance, it means the Pictomancer has seldom featured across the franchise as it has built out, but with it now featuring in Final Fantasy XIV, we thought it would be the perfect time to discuss this colourful and creative job, exploring in great detail the makeup of the job and how it has evolved alongside the series ever since its introduction in Final Fantasy VI. The original thought process behind the Pictomancer isn't easy to define. The idea was developed way back in the early 90s, and it was aligned with a specific character. But it is possible to provide some context as to sources of inspiration. The origins of the Pictomancer name can be broken down into the Latin term pictura, which refers to the art of painting, and the suffix mancer, which is used to denote a practitioner of magic. And that's exactly what the Pictomancer is, a mage that uses brushes as weapons, and who can create magical paintings to deal damage and cause other effects in battle. The concept of the Pictomancer is therefore thematically cohesive, as channeling the creative talents of an artist into magical abilities is itself a pretty creative idea. The Pictomancer also reflects the artistic link between creation and destruction by painting fabulous works of art that allow them to destroy their enemies with style and flair. Now, by the time the Pictomancer first appeared, jobs had already become a well-established part of the Final Fantasy franchise. Final Fantasy I, III, IV, and V had codified many of what would become staples of the franchise. But Final Fantasy VI featured its own share of jobs, old and new, even if they weren't quite as pronounced as in previous iterations. Similar to Final Fantasy IV, each job was designed with a particular character in mind, and it meant party members couldn't switch between them. There was also no notion of jobs evolving throughout the course of the game. It was perhaps for this reason that Final Fantasy VI saw the introduction of some exciting new jobs, as they were essential in shaping the characters' roles, narratives, and designs. These new characters included Shadow, who helped usher in the Assassin job, even if that title was omitted from the North American version, Edgar, who introduced the world to the Machinist, and Sabin, who adopted an evolved take on the classic monk, which we discussed in detail back in our complete evolution of monks video. After all, it's not every monk who has the ability to suplex a train. But perhaps the most unusual addition to the lineup in Final Fantasy VI was a 10-year-old girl called Relm. A pint-sized virtuoso, young Relm was known for her exceptional talent as a painter. Being a resident of Thamasa and a descendant of the Magi, Relm also had a natural talent for channeling magic, which she expressed through the power of her artwork. While Relm had some of the lowest strength and stamina stats in the game, she made up for it by having the highest base magic stat, outranking both Terra and Celes. This came coupled with her above-average stats in evasion, magic evasion, and speed. Relm also had access to two powerful armor pieces in the late game, the Behemoth suit, which boosted all of Relm's stats by 6, and the Cat Ear hood, which made Relm resistant to all elements excluding water and poison. Equipping the latter also doubled the amount of gil earned throughout combat. Additionally, Relm was able to enhance her durability by equipping universal shields, making her fairly formidable as a mage. Relm's signature weapon type was the brush, and she joined the party already equipped with a chocobo brush. Her ultimate weapon was the Angel Brush, which provided a +7 stat boost to both magic and speed, along with a 25% chance of inflicting confuse on the enemy. To mix things up, Realm was also able to equip rods such as magical rods for casting spells or the healing rods to enable free healing for the party and damage against the undead. She could also wield maces and certain daggers as weapons too, but given her low strength stat, there was almost always a better option. As an artist, Realm's special command ability was Sketch, which was first seen in action during the third battle with Ultros. Quite memorably, the moment the lecherous octopus was faced with his own likeness, he immediately fled from battle. The Sketch ability, which could be used to turn an enemy's abilities against them, was certainly inventive and felt perfectly in tune with the concept of the Pictomancer. The curious aspect, however, was that Sketch was influenced by Realm's level as opposed to her stats. So, if Realm was at an equal or higher level to her opponent, and the target wasn't immune to the command, Sketch was guaranteed to take effect. Knowing this, as well as learning each enemy's inbuilt Sketch abilities, was essential in using Realm's signature talent for the benefit of the team. Equipping the beret, an item of headgear found on the floating continent, also increased the success rate of Realm's Sketch ability, while granting a +3 boost to her magic. This felt like an appropriate choice too, as the style of hat has a long-standing association with painters and other artists. However, even with the boost in place, Realm's Sketch ability wasn't always the best move to use in practice, and was generally considered to be underwhelming or sketchy by fans. Elemental enemies, for example, were typically immune to the types of damage they dealt, meaning Realm was better off using some other tactic. And this became even more apparent as Realm's magic stat increased over the course of the game. Enemies that were invisible could not be sketched, and Realm could not attempt to copy any affected spells if she was herself silenced. But perhaps the defining aspect was that the damage monster attacks dealt was not based on Realm stats, but the monster's stats. And as Realm leveled up, it made the Sketch ability less and less effective in comparison to alternative options. On top of that, Sketch was notoriously buggy in early versions of the game. Failing an attempt could result in all manner of chaos, from graphical glitches to filling up the player's inventory with random items and even erasing the player's save data. All in all, not ideal. Realm's other unique ability, Control, did have its uses though. It became available once the fake moustache was equipped, replacing Sketch, and it related to the concept of true names and the idea that knowing a monster's real name allowed for the control of its soul. As such, if successful, Control allowed Realm to take direct control of an enemy and have them perform one of 4 available moves, with the success rate enhanced by equipping the Hypno Crown. Control could be used when facing high-level monsters with a lot of HP, as the rest of the party could keep wailing on the opponent without fear of retaliation. It was also extremely helpful in helping Strago, who was Realm's grandfather and the party's blue mage, to learn more lore abilities. As Strago only had to see the move being performed once in order to learn it himself, Realm could assist by commanding enemies to perform the actions as required. The other unique aspect to Realm came via her desperation attack, Star Prism. This saw the talented artist inflict death on one enemy, eliminating them in an instant, providing that the enemy in question was susceptible to the death status effect. After Final Fantasy VI, the Pictomancer, like many other more unique jobs introduced around that time, drifted into obscurity. But there was almost a revival as part of Final Fantasy X-2. Prior to the release of the international version of X-2 in Japan, Square Enix ran a contest where fans of all ages could submit their own dress sphere ideas. The Festivalist dress sphere, which was based on the drawings of an 8-year-old girl, ultimately won and was included in the international version. But one of the other finalists submitted artwork for the Pictomancer, and while it just missed out on the chance to make it into the international and HD remasters of the game, the concept art of Yuna, Riku and Pain with brushes at the ready gives us a tiny glimpse of how the Pictomancer could have evolved within that particular combat setting. Sadly, this was the closest Pictomancer got to the main series for quite some time, but the job has featured in numerous mobile games. The first instance came in April 2016, as Realm became a playable character in Final Fantasy Record Keeper. She could initially be recruited during the Sketching Miracles challenge event and remained playable until the game was shut down. Compared to the original incarnation in Final Fantasy VI, Realm was now quite versatile in terms of magic, and you could say she'd brushed up on those skills. This meant Realm was able to use black magic abilities up to the rarity rank 3, summoning abilities up to rank 4, and white magic abilities up to rank 5. Realm's equipable brushes were also retained, but they were now classified as rods. Even though these aspects were changed though, Realm's control ability did return, but it no longer had the same function. Revised into a soul break, control allowed Realm to inflict confuse on her target, and this felt more like a callback to Angel Brush, her ultimate weapon in Final Fantasy VI, which had a chance of landing this effect. Besides control, which was Realm's default soul break, she also had access to a plethora of new abilities, each of which had some kind of artistic name. But the notion of sketching enemies was removed, as there was a distinct focus on curative utility as opposed to dealing damage. The only major exception to this was Ink Blast. This ability served as a clear throwback to the encounter with Ultros, dealing non-elemental summon magic while also having the chance to inflict blind. And this ability also had an association with the cat ear hood. The next free-to-play mobile game to feature Realm was Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, where she was added to the game as a 5 to 7 star unit. In the game, Realm was also designed to be quite versatile, but the way this manifested was very different to Record Keeper. Realm did still have access to high-level black magic spells such as Tornado and Ultima, but she was now unable to use white magic. Instead, the majority of her application came through Realm's abilities, which brought back the connection with monsters being faced, albeit in a slightly different way. It meant that instead of Realm leveraging an ability the enemy could use, she now supported the party by providing buffs and debuffs. For example, if Realm used Undead Sketch, the party gained increased physical and magic damage against Reaper-type foes for 3 turns. Realm could also use Total Eraser to remove all status effects from the combat scene, and was even able to create drawings that dealt either physical or magic damage. As further references, Realm's limit break was now Ultros Sketch. This dealt significant damage while increasing fire and lightning damage for 3 turns. She could also equip the Memento Ring accessory along with Shadow, and this symbolised the father-daughter relationship between the two characters, which was strongly implied throughout Final Fantasy VI. And her Super Trust Master award was the Angel Brush. Brave Exvius, though, also introduced a new artistic character called Poppy as a summonable vision and one of Fina's companions in Season 3. Wielding a staff called Poppy's Passionate Paintbrush, Poppy was an upbeat and cheerful graffiti artist whose mission was to bring colour back into the world. While Poppy was never described as a Pictomancer, her combat style certainly fit the bill, as she used her colourful paints to unleash elemental damage while also providing powerful buffs to her allies. Now, unlike the rest of the Dissidia franchise, Opera Omnia was closer in aesthetics and mechanics to a traditional role-playing game, and it was here that Realm made her way back into the picture yet again. Obtained through an event called 1,000 Words, not to be confused with the song from 10.2, Realm was credited with the mysterious ability to bring her paintings to life. Her signature sketch ability returned, although it was now modified to be more of a standard damage-dealing move, and Opera Omnia also brought back her Star Prism attack, which now dealt hefty amounts of damage and delivered debuffs as opposed to attempting to instant kill a single target. In general though, outside of naming conventions, the original application of the Pictomancer was not retained, and there was also limited synergy between the appearances of Realm and Record Keeper, Brave Exvius, and Opera Omnia. What did return, however, was the Memento Ring and the Angel Brush, which was one of Realm's most powerful weapons alongside the Wild Brush and the Rainbow Brush. The other cute aspect though was that while Realm was busy at her canvas, players could see her bringing to life some of the original artwork from Final Fantasy VI, including her goddess painting as seen in the Chardonnay boss battle. Now, we don't often include the Bravely series in these videos, but this time we figured it made sense, both in discussing the Pictomancer's evolution and in showing the darker side of the job. Bravely Default 2 introduced us to Foley. She held the Pictomancer asterisk and was capable of creating magical paintings, but also committing some heinous acts. Despite her youth and innocent appearance, the encounter with Foley in the secret studio revealed some dark truths about the lives she'd taken and the blood she'd spilled for the sake of her masterpiece. Perhaps even more shocking was how little she seemed to care. As the primary antagonist of the Wizworld portion of the game, the boss battle with Foley was pretty intense. Foley was flanked by a golem and rock tortoise, possibly alluding to creatures that she'd magically sculpted, and her prized painting periodically came to life and attacked the party using dark or dread. And while Foley seemed like the polar opposite of Realm, one thing they did have in common was the ability to use Star Prism. In Bravely Default 2, this attack worked just as it had for Realm in Final Fantasy VI, granting the user the opportunity to inflict death. After obtaining the Pictomancer asterisk, players were then granted access to the Artistry command. There was no notion of sketch or control here, but the association with buffing and debuffing that was prominent in Brave Exvius did return. Splatter, for example, reduced elemental resistance, and Dirty Fight appeared as a passive that helped the Pictomancer deal more damage in proportion to the amount of status ailments the target was afflicted with. Purify then served as an equivalent to Total Eraser, except focus was only on one target as opposed to the entire combat scene. Beyond this, Pictomancers could also deal decent magic damage, and harkening back to the original iteration, based on Realm stats, they also had very high MP pools, high magic attack, but also decent speed and evasion. That then brings us on to the most iteration of the Pictomancer though, which appears in Final Fantasy XIV via the Dawntrail expansion. Revealed at the Final Fantasy XIV Tokyo Fan Fest in January 2024, the Pictomancer was confirmed to debut alongside the Viper as a new ranged magical caster DPS job with supportive abilities. As the latest Disciple of Magic job, the Pictomancer can use paintbrushes to manipulate ether in order to create their artwork. These creations can then be used to attack enemies and support allies, and the Pictomancer's moves and abilities look even more stylish and fluid than ever before. Many are aligned with dealing specific elemental damage, but there's a notion of drawings changing how the Pictomancer operates, as landscapes, hammers and palms can be drawn, and these can influence combat application. Star Prism also returns as a level 100 spell, capable of dealing high damage and also healing nearby party members. Beyond this, Krill Baldessian has been designated as a Pictomancer, and her outfit sports Realm's Katir hood from Final Fantasy VI. It means this latest iteration of the Pictomancer job retains some elements of the original incarnation, while leaning more into the damage dealing aspect. But what's perhaps most interesting is how the Pictomancer has evolved in general over time. Due to the unorthodox nature of Realm's appearance in Final Fantasy VI and how broken the mechanic was, it was difficult for developers to find a way to bring forth the same mechanics into more modern settings. Within the mobile gaming space, this saw the application of Realm change, as she was altered to being a healer, to a buffer and debuffer, and then to a damage dealer. Even though these transitions were quite extreme, elements were retained between them though, such as specific equipment and ability names, and even some functionality. Final Fantasy XIV appears to have taken a similar approach. The core visual and stylistic essence of the Pictomancer has been retained, with plenty of references found within, but it now fulfills the function of being a magical DPS as opposed to assisting the party in other ways. And as Final Fantasy XIV continues to build out and tweaks and modifications are made, it's going to be interesting to see how the job evolves further in the future, and whether its appearance in Bravely Default 2 and Final Fantasy XIV will see the Pictomancer continue its small renaissance. But that's the end of this evolutionary study. It would be great to hear what you thought, and if you're going to be playing Pictomancer in Final Fantasy XIV, so let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, then feel free to give it a like. Alright everyone, with that, this is Darryl signing out. As always, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, The Livestream, Gregory, Juan Jaramillo, Justin Dent and Sukun TDK, who are super special Onion Eye supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching the video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.